Stewart-Haas Racing extends a key driver. Chase Elliott will run the Truck Series race at Daytona, and NASCAR tests mufflers on their Cup cars. I'll be honest, I really just put that in the title to attract some rage clicks. It doesn't sound any different. The cars are still gonna be loud. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. Lots to get to today. If you're new to the channel and you haven't hit that subscribe button already, I encourage you to do so to stay in the loop on all things NASCAR. Let's go and begin with the Phoenix test this week, specifically the muffler test. I want to make this clear at the very beginning because I know there's a lot of people who click on my videos, watch 10 seconds, and immediately leave a hot take in the comments. Yes, NASCAR tested mufflers. No, it doesn't sound hardly any different. Bob Pockrass, reporter from Fox Sports, was on the ground this week in Phoenix, posting clips, side-by-side comparisons with and without mufflers. And from what I could tell, the cars sounded a little quieter when they're just sitting there idle, like on pit road or in the garage. But once they got up on the track, especially a few of them at a time, it sounded about the same. Some people were saying that the tones maybe are a little deeper. You might be right. NASCAR's planning to use these mufflers at the Clash and hopefully at the Chicago street race, although it sounds like there's still some work that needs to be done regarding heat inside the cockpit to make that possible. Maybe some other short tracks, of course I mentioned it earlier this week, but if you want to race at Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, you're likely going to need to use mufflers to get the local community even remotely on board. The cars are still going to be extremely loud. It doesn't sound hardly any different. If nobody told you there were mufflers, you probably wouldn't have ever noticed. So I just wanted to get that out of the way first because I saw in my last video so many people commenting, oh, mufflers, oh, it's like they didn't even listen to what I said in the actual video. So I wanted to make that clear at the top of this episode. This should be, honestly, the last time we ever talk about mufflers, to be quite honest. The more interesting aspect of the two-day test at Phoenix that just concluded were the aerodynamic changes that NASCAR tried out. They modified the panels underneath the car, the underwing. Drivers said they didn't feel much difference. So then NASCAR started playing with spoiler heights. They started with the 4-inch spoiler that was used at tracks like Phoenix last year. They tested a 2.5-inch tall spoiler. The drivers said there wasn't a whole lot of difference made. And then at the end of the second day, they tested a 2-inch rear spoiler, also a whole inch narrower, and several drivers had very positive things to say. Christopher Bell said, quote, "I couldn't tell one lick of difference. It all felt the same until we did the last package. I don't even know exactly the details, but I know it was smaller than the 2.5-inch spoiler and there were some underbody pieces removed. I thought that was tremendously better and really hope we go that direction." One NASCAR executive said he was very pleased by Christopher Bell's comments, so that indicates they might go the tiny spoiler direction. We're less than a month away from the start of the 2023 season, so if they do make any major aero changes to the short track, short oval rules package, likely wouldn't be implemented until later in the spring, maybe even the summer. But it sounds like by the end of this week's tests, NASCAR and the teams had some positive directions to look at. Sounds like there is a real possibility of future tests with more and more cars to try out some of these changes further. But that's the latest news out of the two-day Phoenix test that just wrapped up. Let's talk about some driver announcements. Yesterday, out of nowhere, Chase Elliott revealed that he's going to run the truck race at Daytona next month. He'll drive the 35 truck for McNally Hildman Racing, MHR, with sponsorship from Gates Hydraulics and Napa Auto Care. I didn't know this until I read the press release, but this will be Chase Elliott's first ever super speedway start in a NASCAR truck. I honestly don't know what possessed Chase Elliott to want to run the Daytona truck race. Cup drivers are often looking for additional seat time, but usually it's at a road course or a new oval track that's been added to the schedule. I guess Daytona is one of the biggest races, if not the biggest race on the Truck Series calendar, so if you're gonna do one, go big or go home, I suppose. Chase Elliott's certainly gonna be one of the favorites. Jake Garcia is slated to begin driving the 35 truck once he turns 18 in March. So until then, I guess, yeah, that seat was open. MHR added Christian Eckes in the offseason. He's gonna drive the 19 truck, taking over for Derek Kraus. So it really feels like that team is trying to make some positive changes. They feel like they should be more competitive than they have been. Christian Eckes, he's won a truck race before. Last year with Thor Sport, didn't win, but had 8 top 5s, 15 top 10s. He's a solid enough truck series driver. Could be a great step in the right direction. You bring Chase Elliott, a Cup Series champion, in, even just for one race. Yeah, it's a super speedway. That also seems like a step in the right direction for a fairly young truck series team. But yeah, just some surprising news yesterday. I did not expect Chase Elliott to be on the truck series Daytona entry list, but here we are. Some other news yesterday, Ty Dillon has a new sponsor and will make select starts in the Xfinity Series driving the RCR number 3. Ferris Mowers, longtime Ty Dillon sponsor, will sponsor select Cup Series races for Dillon, who will race for Spire this coming season in the 77. But the more interesting part of this announcement, in my opinion, is the news that Ty Dillon will once again join forces with his grandfather, Richard Childress, and will drive the iconic 3 in select Xfinity races. His first race is scheduled to be the May 13th event at Darlington Raceway. The rest of his schedule has not yet been announced. Ty Dillon, I feel like you could do a really interesting deep dive into the highs and lows of his career. When he was coming up through the trucks and Xfinity Series ranks, there were flashes of potential. People were comparing him, of course, to his older brother Austin Dillon, who was won an Xfinity Series championship. I think everyone was giving Ty Dillon a pretty high ceiling. Then he went to Germain Racing for 3 or 4 years and just kind of, I don't know, I hate to say wasted his time, but that's kind of how it felt. It felt like he wasted his time in Cup for the 3 or 4 years there. It was a full-time gig, good sponsorship from Geico for many years. Not a bad situation, but not a competitive one, and not a team that really seemed like it was ever going anywhere. That team shuts down, and he's been trying to figure it out ever since. He got that full-time ride with Petty GMS last year in the 42. I was optimistic, cautiously, and he did absolutely nothing. He had 1 top 10 all season long. New team at the time, new car for a new team, so it wasn't an easy situation to jump into, but I expected a little bit more. Now he's with Spire, a team that just has underperformed the last couple of years. Again, a team that I'm waiting to actually see take strides in a positive direction with LaJoie, and hasn't happened yet. Maybe this is the year, but I'm tired of saying that with Ty Dillon in particular. The guy can drive. Absolutely. He can drive in one of the top NASCAR ranks. And that's why his career has been so interesting and kind of tragic in many ways the last few years. You remember a year or two ago, he posted that long video on social media where he was very upfront and honest about the mental difficulties of losing your ride, trying to find your next opportunity, the struggles of being a mid-pack NASCAR driver. And I think it resonated with a lot of fans. I think it caused a lot of fans to gravitate to Ty Dillon, give him some support. I hope whatever he does this year with Spire and in these select RCR starts, I hope he's great. I hope he has flashes once again, because he's not that old. He could still very well have a successful NASCAR career. Who's it with? Is it with Richard Childress? Spire? Do they ever evolve into what I think they can be one day? We'll have to wait and see. The big news of the day, however, comes from Stewart-Haas Racing. Earlier this morning, SHR announced that they have signed Chase Briscoe to a multi-year contract extension. Mahindra Tractors, Rush Truck Centers, High Point, and more will continue to sponsor and support the team. Co-owner Tony Stewart said, quote, "Chase has made the most of every opportunity and the proof is in the results. Keeping him at SHR was a priority and we're proud to have him in our race cars for many more years to come." The extension is listed as a multi-year. Tony Stewart there suggests many, many years. Is it more than the typical 2-year extension? Could it be 3? Could it be 4? I'm not sure. Chase Briscoe had this to say. "I remember getting signed by Ford in 2017 and I told people, if I could pick one place to be, it would be Stewart-Haas Racing. And if I could drive one car, it would be the number 14 car. That would be the ultimate dream. And now, here I am." Chase Briscoe's story is a remarkable one, from sleeping on couches in Charlotte just a few years ago to getting that big break with Ford and, as Tony Stewart said, making the most of many of his opportunities. He's now got what every Cup Series driver is looking for: some long-term stability in a competitive ride. I'll talk more about Stewart-Haas Racing in a moment because this is a huge signing for them. But for Chase Briscoe, last year he avoided the sophomore slump. He got his first win, made the playoffs, had 10 top 10 finishes, and actually made a strong run late in the season, made it to the round of 8. I think it's safe to say Briscoe exceeded most expectations last year after kind of a lackluster rookie season. He joined SHR at a rough time. 2021 was not a good year for Stewart-Haas. Harvick was winless. Briscoe's numbers as a rookie were not good, but his sophomore season was a huge step in the right direction, so I'm glad he's being rewarded with a longer term opportunity. Now, though, if I tie this into the bigger picture that is Stewart-Haas Racing, this is huge for that team. Stewart-Haas Racing needed to lock up Chase Briscoe long term with sponsorship. With Kevin Harvick retiring after this year and Eric Almirola likely gone in the next year or two, SHR could not afford a third car also needing a reset. And when it comes to sponsorship, Kevin Harvick, when he retires at the end of this year, will Busch Beer stick around? Will Hunt Brothers Pizza? Will Gear Wrench? They might, but they also might not. So securing Mahindra, High Point Rush Truck Centers, I assume for multiple years. I guess it wasn't explicitly defined in the press release, but I would hope they'll stick around about as long as Briscoe does. That's a huge deal as well. Stewart-Haas Racing needs some stability right now. There's way too much turnover and there's way too much uncertainty. They replaced struggling Cole Custer with Ryan Preece this year, who I'm pretty high on, but even I'll admit, he's still a big unknown. I think he's a driver who, give him a year or two, will be a playoff contender. I'm not sure about right off the bat, but he could also bust. When he was at JTG Doherty for those couple of years, he had some low moments. What was it? 3 straight last place finishes at one point? So you have one unknown with Ryan Preece. You have 2 other unknowns. Who's going to replace Almirola? Who's going to replace Kevin Harvick? We've talked about this already. There aren't a ton of game-changing star free agents available at this point. I mean, Denny Hamlin's in a contract year, but I don't think he leaves Joe Gibbs Racing or Toyota. Same thing with Martin Truex Jr. I think he'll either stay with Gibbs or retire. Michael McDowell, I could see him joining SHR and contending for some wins here and there, but again, he's not a star. Alex Bowman's in a contract year, but I think he wants to stay with Hendrick. Ally seems to like him, and again, he's a big name, I suppose, but I'm not sure he's going to completely elevate and turn around the SHR team. Ross Chastain maybe, but I can't imagine Trackhouse will let him get away without signing an extension. Daniel Suarez, he's been to SHR before, didn't really work out. I see him staying with Trackhouse. So there's really no big name free agents currently in Cup. You look at the Kevin Harvick Incorporated clients. Kevin Harvick's management team represents Harrison Burton. He did not have a great rookie year, not at all. Riley Herbst in Xfinity, Ricky Stenhouse. So SHR is going to have to look down at trucks, Xfinity. Can they get Zane Smith away from Front Row? He's a Ford driver, yes, but I believe he's directly under contract with Front Row. Can they pry away last year's Truck Series champion and get him in one of their cars? That would be big, but that's a big unknown. I've heard about John Hunter Nemechek potentially. I think he's good. He's got some Cup experience, but like Ryan Preece, I think he's also a big unknown. So there's so much uncertainty at SHR. I'm glad they were able to lock up Chase Briscoe for at least a few years. Sorry, I took a long way to get back to my original point. I'm convinced Chase Briscoe is a real Cup Series driver. I don't know if he'll ever evolve into like what Kevin Harvick became, a perennial contender, an all-time great, a future Hall of Famer. I don't know if that's necessarily in the cards for Chase Briscoe, but I think as long as he's at SHR, he's going to have a very solid career. He's still pretty young. I think he's still going to improve. He's not in his prime yet. He's got to clean up some of the mistakes and some of the inconsistency. Like, I was raving about last year. He avoided the sophomore slump. He came on strong late, but over the summer last year, Chase Briscoe was terrible. He started off hot. He won the 3rd, 4th race of the year at Phoenix. Almost won the Bristol dirt race, but took himself out. Almost won the Coke 600, but again, made a mistake and took himself out. And then basically he fell off the map for 3-4 months there. Playoffs began, and he got hot. He finished the year with 6 top 10s in the final 7 races. That's how he was able to get into the round of 8. Cut down on the mistakes, cut down on the inconsistency. If we get, final 7 races of 2022, Chase Briscoe going forward, then SHR may be okay. But I think it's too early to tell exactly what Chase Briscoe is. I think he's good. I'm not convinced he's a future superstar just yet, but the potential is there. If we're going to talk about ceilings, like I mentioned earlier, the ceiling for Briscoe is, honestly, I would say Tony Stewart. Drives for him, same car, both from Indiana, right? How many races did Tony Stewart win? Like 44, I think, 49, something in the 40s. 3 championships, maybe that's a tall order, but I think Chase Briscoe that's his ceiling. His ceiling is Tony Stewart. I think Briscoe's basement, I'll just stick with 14 drivers. I think the basement for Briscoe is Clint Bowyer, which is not bad at all, because Bowyer, I think, won 10 races in his career. There are a lot of Cup Series drivers who never come close to that mark. So I think Briscoe will land somewhere in there. That's a really good driver. I'm glad Stewart-Haas Racing was able to lock him up for at least the next handful of seasons. That's huge. A team that desperately needed some stability. I think they got it here with Chase Briscoe. Now their attention turns to the other 3 cars potentially. What do their futures look like? The Stewart-Haas Racing team is going to continue to change dramatically, I think, year after year. You still got Cole Custer waiting in Xfinity for another Cup Series opportunity. Maybe Riley Herbst, who it sounds like will run the Daytona 500 at least for Rick Ware Racing. You got some drivers there, but I don't think anyone gets you quite as excited as Chase Briscoe does right now. Unless they can get Zane Smith. I'd be pretty excited about a Zane Smith Stewart-Haas Racing pairing, I'll be honest. But that is a huge, huge if. Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you like this deal from a Chase Briscoe perspective? Getting that long-term stability with a decent team? Do you like this from SHR's perspective? Are you convinced that Chase Briscoe can kind of be that new leader? Once Harvick and once Eric Almirola retire, Chase Briscoe will likely become the longest tenured SHR Cup driver. That's crazy! Do you think he can become a leader? Let me know down in the comment section below, but that's gonna do it for this episode. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave it a like. It helps the channel out a ton. And if you're new, once again, hit that subscribe button down below to stay up to date on all things stock car racing. And as always, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters for your continued and very generous support. Yesterday, I uploaded my 5 bold predictions heading into the 2023 NASCAR season. If you haven't watched it yet, be sure to check it out. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my takes. I will see you all again very, very soon. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.